Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. Thank you to our sponsor for today's episode, East Brother Beer. Located on Canal Boulevard in Point Richmond, East Brother Beer mixes classic brewing styles with precision and modern sensibility to create the perfect Bay Area craft beer. The smooth and relaxing rhythms most often associated with a warm New Orleans night form the basis of America's classical music, jazz. For more than 100 years, jazz music has always held a place in our nation's heart. As jazz music spread, it molded within communities across the nation, resulting in different subgenres that match the wide diversity in America. With each generation, young musicians are given the chance to create their own spin on jazz, further evolving the sounds. This evolution has led to some amazing musicians. Our guest today, Norah Stanley, is one of those musicians. Not even 24 years old, Norah is the latest jazz phenomenon in the Bay Area scene. Norah, thanks for coming on to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so one thing I like to ask every guest on the podcast is what currently has your attention?
Music-wise?
It can be anything, book, politics, music, it could be TV shows, movies.
Well, I think it's hard to get away from politics right now, so that's been definitely occupying part of my brain, but I saw Parasite last night.
Oh, nice. I love that movie.
Yeah, it was really good.
How do you like it?
It was good. It was like really thought-provoking, super metaphorical. Definitely still processing it and will for a few days, I guess. But it was a great movie. Music-wise, been listening to a lot of Bjork. I feel like she's always kind of in my currently playing playlist. Also listening to Dick Oates, who's a great alto saxophonist, and he's inspiring me a lot right now.
Now, you grew up in the Bay Area. What brought you back here to the Bay Area from college?
I knew I wanted to move back here and save some money before I went anywhere else, because I was very lucky to have the opportunity to be able to stay at home for a year after I graduated and save some money that way. I also, having kind of started gigging a little bit around here during high school, I'd made some connections and been able to come back and use those to get gigs and know people around here to start networking and playing. But the Bay Area is such it's such an encouraging community that this was a really logical place to start my career, I felt like.
I try to explain to a lot of people about the Bay Area when I go traveling, and I say California is a bubble within the entire U.S., but the Bay Area itself is a bubble within California.
Even more so, yeah.
Yeah, and so the podcast here, the show that we do, I would say 99% of all the people I've interviewed are people that are local. They focus on the Bay Area community. So for you, what do you love so much about the Bay Area? I mean, is there a specific spot you like to perform at? Is there a specific place that you like to hang out?
I think aside from the music side of it, one of the biggest draws for California and the Bay Area for me is being able to be outside a lot and be in nature and go for hikes and be able to go to the beach and to the mountains pretty easily. So that's huge for me, and that's definitely on my mind when I'm thinking about elsewhere to move in my next phase of life. But musically, I think right now there are a lot of like more venues popping up in the Bay Area that are incubating the scene here. Even just in the last month, it seemed like there are some new jam sessions popping up and more factors of that encouraging community that I mentioned. In terms of venues that I really like to play at, I really like the Red Poppy Art House. It's a really intimate, small little vibe, and I think that's pretty indicative of the Bay Area jazz scene and music scene in general. They have other music besides jazz there.
So you're seeing more venues pop up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. We had a few filmmakers here that did the a documentary series or a documentary film based on the history of East Bay punk,
Hmm.
and it was very interesting to see how they told the story of punk music and how it went from San Francisco and across the Bay, and
Hmm.
of course the Gilman Club in
Yeah.
Berkeley. And so I always thought, well, that'd be very cool to see in a lot of different other music genres, not just East Bay punk. So,
Mhm.
is that something that you're seeing in jazz?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a San Francisco scene and an East Bay scene that definitely have like crossover. And like back in the 60s, 70s, there were like a lot more clubs in San Francisco and in the Bay Area that like really supported a vibrant jazz scene. And unfortunately, I think a lot of those closed, and we went through kind of like a downward phase of like having fewer, like more musicians leave the Bay Area and fewer places for people to play. I'm hoping that we're on an upswing from that.
What do you think musicians left the Bay Area?
If clubs were closing, they didn't have places to play. People would move to New York or LA.
Is the jazz scene pretty big out in New York?
Yeah, very big in New York. That was kind of not the birthplace of jazz necessarily. It goes back to New Orleans, but a lot of musicians moved up to New York, and that was has always been a huge hub for music, and jazz especially. But yeah, I'm hoping that there are more venues coming about. They're kind of less like you go there specifically to listen to music, more like it might be a pizzeria that has music on the side, but that's a starting point for
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, dedicated listening.
At what point did you, or how old were you when you started to learn how to play music, and then did you pick up the saxophone right away?
I started music when I started like formal piano lessons, I think 5th grade, probably around 5th grade. I really wanted to play flute, but my dad, he's a guitar player, and a very avid music listener and record collector, so he was very insistent that I learn piano first, which I'm really grateful for in the long run. Because
was there a reason for piano first?
Piano's like a very physical, visual instrument, so it's a really helpful instrument to have for like theory once you get started on like music theory. And like now I compose a lot on piano, and my piano skills aren't great, but they're proficient enough that I have like 3 piano students and I can compose enough on piano. And
so composing on piano, are you able
Yeah.
to translate the music score over to saxophone fairly easy?
Yeah, I have to be thinking about certain things like range and what's gonna sound good on saxophone or even fit, because with piano you have 88 keys, but with a saxophone you only have a limited range basically. So that's something that I'm thinking about when I'm transferring over from piano to saxophone when I'm writing. But usually it's like the process kind of overlaps with both instruments, so I'll have a seed on one instrument and bring it over to the other instrument, something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so piano was like a really important beginning.
So it's the
stage
foundation.
for me. Yeah, definitely a foundation that I use really, really avidly now. But
And how old were you when you picked up the sax?
sax was 7th grade, I believe. So after I did a year of piano, I continued with piano, but I also added flute. And then flute it's kind of a little easier to go from flute to saxophone because the fingerings are very similar. So the embouchure, like where you put your mouth on the instrument, definitely is very different, but flute embouchure is a lot more difficult than saxophone, so it was easy.
So I assume you also played in the middle school, high school band.
Yeah.
Did you play in any of the band or bugle corps outside of school?
Yeah, I was in a couple of different like conglomerate programs. One at SF Jazz, the SF Jazz High School All-Star Band, and I also played in like different combos at the jazz school in Berkeley, which is actually afforded me an opportunity now that I'm back here to teach there and basically coach the ensembles that I was in middle school and high school. So
oh, very
that was cool. Yeah.
It's like a full circle, right?
Yeah, totally a full circle.
Yeah. Now, you recently performed over at the SF Jazz Center. How was that?
It was good. It was such an honor to be able to bring my music there, and I'm also really encouraged by the fact that they have this new series called Artists on the Rise that my performance was part of, because there haven't been that many opportunities for local musicians to play at the SF Jazz Center. So I'm hopeful that they're bringing in more and more local musicians to be able to present their music, which is good. We need that.
So after graduating high school, you went to college. What was your major in college? I mean, did you focus solely on music?
I did. I went to Oberlin College, and I entered as not in the conservatory part. Oberlin has a college and then also a conservatory, so you can do just music, you can do just college, or they have a double degree program, which is 1 degree in music, 1 degree in whatever other liberal arts major you choose. But I entered not as a music student, and then realized I wanted to be able to take advantage of all the resources I had there, so I added music my second year and then did a double degree program.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I did music and then, so jazz and then Latin American studies was my major in the college.
Okay, so I do want to get into jazz music here. Mm-hmm. What draw you to jazz music? What were the beginning stages for you, and why do you love it so much?
Well, I think growing up, I was always surrounded by a lot of different kinds of music. My parents listened to like almost every kind of music, and I had exposure to jazz at a really young age, and not just like the straight ahead styles, but kind of other avant-garde styles and new, like, mixed with world music and all kinds of different music. So kind of infiltrated my ears at a young age. And then there was one specific time that I remember where I was driving in the car with my dad and listening to KCSM, the local jazz station, and one particular song came on that really grabbed my ear, and we drove to the record store and bought the record right away. And that was like kind of the one specific moment that I remember really being like drawn into jazz.
So for a lot of, and for myself too, but for a lot of the listeners and viewers that may not be 100% familiar with all the different styles of jazz, can you break that down for us?
Yeah,
what are
sure.
the different styles and how do they vary?
Oh man, there's so many different styles. There's like traditional trad jazz, which comes from New Orleans. It all goes back to New Orleans, but there's like more straight ahead, like bebop, which came about in like the 40s, 50s. Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, who were really important innovators in the music, and then had like the avant-garde movement come along, and some important musicians in the avant-garde movement were like Ornette Coleman, Eric Dolphy, Albert Eilers, all saxophone players. And different genres that all had similar roots, but like you might, if you turn on the local jazz station, you'll probably most likely hear pretty straight ahead jazz, what we would call straight ahead, which oftentimes will have like swing beat and you'll have like drums, bass, piano, or guitar, some sort of rhythm instrument, harmony instrument, and then like saxophone, trumpet, trombone, one of those. And typically with like straight ahead jazz, you'll have the melody and then solos and then the melody. But then there's avant-garde jazz. It kind of combines a lot of free improvisation, different styles of free improvisation where there's not necessarily a song form as prescribed in like more straight ahead music. But yeah.
So there's really a lot of different styles.
Yeah,
so
that was just getting on the surface of it all, but
yeah, so someone would have to sit down and listen to a lot of music to really identify the various different styles.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely like a lifetime of study and devotion to that music.
Now, even playing the saxophone, I mean, many people refer to the saxophone, but there's also different styles, correct?
Yeah.
And so we have the baritone, we have alto and bass, or the bass. Which one do you play? Do you play all three? And how do they differ between them?
Yeah, so the main ones actually instead of bass would be tenor. So there's the highest of those ones is the highest of the most common saxophones would be soprano. That is the highest in range, so that'll be like sounding in the higher pitches, and then you've got.
So when you hear a musician and you hear that super high pitch saxophone being played, that's what they're using, the soprano.
Soprano. Okay. And then you've got alto, which is what my main instrument is. And then you've got tenor. So for instance, like for people who might not be familiar, but maybe are familiar with a couple of different jazz musicians, like alto players, Charlie Parker and Sonny Stitt are some examples for alto. And then tenor, John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins. And then baritone saxophone would be Jerry Mulligan or, yeah. Okay, so you have the soprano, then you have the alto is next, and then the tenor. Yeah, okay. And I play a little tenor. Bought one last year, trying to develop my sound on that instrument. It's definitely different than...
So when you're playing the three different types of sax, how do they differ? I mean, in the playing style, like what's the difference for you?
In listening to a lot of different players on the different saxophones, you definitely hear different inclinations that people take. So like there's kind of an alto sound per se, or like a tenor sound. But my hope is that I'm kind of like forging my own path on the instrument so that I'm not necessarily going into prescribed like alto sound or tenor sound. But they definitely serve different roles in big band and in yeah.
Okay. So if someone wants to go see some live jazz music, I mean, what are some venues that you would recommend for them to check out?
Yeah, well, SF Jazz is a great venue. They're bringing in tons of great music from all over the world, and now bringing in more local artists, which is great. And their spaces are really awesome to hear music in. Great acoustics and pretty comfortable. Like I said, Red Poppy Art House is a great, more intimate space. There's this new venue in Oakland that's started having music, I think 7 nights a week, called Artichoke Pizza. It's kind of like a greasy pizza joint, but they've got like great music, local artists every night, and there's a jam session which brings in a lot of people. Let's see, Club Deluxe in San Francisco has music all the time. Really great jazz jam session on Monday and Tuesday nights. And
so there's jazz basically every night at so many different venues.
Yeah, if you want to hear jazz on a Tuesday, you can. If you want to hear jazz on a Friday, you can.
Yeah, it'd be nice. And So it'd be nice to have a website where someone can just go
Yeah.
and check out all the different jazz venues. Is there a website
Totally.
that you would recommend
I don't
to
know
where
that
people
there
can
is
pull up
one.
venues?
There should be like a directory of like what's playing tonight. I know I have a friend in New York who like puts together a newsletter for all the events that are happening in New York and just puts it out to his friends. But that would be cool to have something like that around here.
Yeah, it would
And
be.
it wouldn't be as long or difficult to put together because there isn't as much going on here, but still a lot. But you know, you can check my website for my events.
And what's your website?
My website is myname.com, so norahstanley.com.
Now, so people can go to your website to learn more about you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there music samples people can listen to? And then as far as teaching, so you teach other students
Mhm.
and they can find more information about teaching?
Yeah. I have a contact page on my website for booking and for teaching inquiries, and also have a page for video and audio samples that I have.
Great. When you're composing music, what's that process like for you? Because I've been talking to several musicians and filmmakers lately, and it's very interesting to hear how everyone has their own specific process and how they score a film and how they compose a song. So what's your process?
Man, it differs almost every time. It's definitely not like a streamlined process yet, but sometimes I'll be writing with a deadline and I'll have to just sit down, even if I don't have like a seed of inspiration at the beginning. I'll just have to sit down and like something will come. But sometimes I have to use different techniques that I know of, either from school or from like other teachers that I've studied with for composition. But
like what kind of techniques?
Like I'll take like a short phrase that I come up with, and then I can like turn it around and put notes in different places or play it backwards. Take like my phone number, for instance. This is kind of like a compositional game almost, but you can take your phone number or some number and assign pitches to each number so that like 0 through 9 each has a different pitch. We might call it a tone row. And then like find your phone number and play each note that those numbers correspond to. And then you have a...
So would the idea using that tactic be that once you hear something that you necessarily did not have to force yourself to create, but now that you hear something, you're then able to extract it,
right.
And now you have fresh ideas?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
very
kind of
interesting.
Kind of a getting started thing if you don't have any kind of inspiration. Sometimes.
So it sounds like musicians and composers also go through a type of mental block, like very similar to writer's block.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely part of the whole process. I'll go through periods where I don't feel inspired to write anything, but I'm trying to be more disciplined about sitting down like every day or every couple days and like writing a piece of music and finishing it. And even if it doesn't have to be something that's performed, it's something that I've finished, and I think that's an important process to get.
Is that consistency?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just finished reading a book by Stephen King called On Writing,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote it many years ago, but one of the things he talks about is you have to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And for writing, going back to like the writer's block, the mental block you get where you can't even come up with a story, he has various techniques that he breaks down in that book, but one of the things he says is you have to commit yourself to at least 1 hour of writing per day.
Mm-hmm.
Sit down and just write.
Yeah.
Even if it's not about the story that you're trying to put together, you just have to push yourself to write. And of course, he breaks down some techniques very similar to the phone
Mm-hmm.
technique, where you just start writing about things, pops up kind of relaxes your mind to then think about and maybe go back to that original story you're writing about.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the more I spend time on my saxophone every day practicing, the more I feel I have seeds of inspiration on a regular basis for composition. So
how many hours of practice do you think you have under your belt?
Oh, total? Oh, I have no idea. But in the last couple of years, I'd say in the last 2 years, I've gotten to where I'm practicing anywhere between 2 and 6 hours a day.
Wow.
Trying to be on the higher end of that, but life sometimes gets in the way.
Yeah, but that's still a lot of practice hours. And if you're going to make a living and this is your passion, it's a lot easier for you to do it.
Yeah.
Rough average 1,460 minutes.
Wow. That's a lot of minutes.
Rough average.
Yeah.
How many hours is that total? So, your top 3 saxophone or jazz musicians that the audience needs to check out.
I said the words wrong. It's 1,460 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, minutes and stuff.
Okay, 1,600.
1,460 hours.
460 hours. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So, for the listeners and viewers, the top 3 saxophone performers, musicians, or the top 3 jazz players.
Mm-hmm.
Someone wants to get familiar, hands down, they need to listen to who?
Well, I'll start on a local level. One of my teachers actually in growing up and has been an incredible influence to me all along, and it's definitely underappreciated on a national scale, is Knutson, who's an incredible saxophonist. Highly recommend checking out her work. She's playing tonight actually at the Makeout Room with her sextet. Definitely gonna go check that out. But otherwise, trumpet player Ambrose Akinmusri is one of my favorite musicians of all time. Incredibly creative and natural musician, beautiful writer, beautiful player, beautiful human being. And let's see. Living, are we talking living, dead, both?
It could be both.
Okay. Well, it's really hard to narrow it down to 3, but I'm listening to a lot of Ornette Coleman. Been an incredible influence for me. John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Eric Dolphy, Sonny Rollins. I'm gonna stop because that's way more than 3, but yeah, definitely can narrow it down to 3.
So going forward, what's your ultimate goal? What are you trying to pursue?
Definitely want to be playing as much music as possible, getting better and better, and developing a sound, developing my craft. I'm hoping to move to New York in not too long. I love the Bay Area and I want to come back here, but I think that being in New York is an important thing for an artist right now.
And why is that?
Just the concentration of art that's going on there, and concentration of music that's been such an important historic place for jazz in particular, that being there for some amount of time is gonna shape my sound and shape who I am, and that's definitely something that I want in my life.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So Norah, thanks for coming on to the show.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Hopefully you like the beer.
Yeah.
Big shout out to East Brother Beer Company for being the show sponsor. Definitely go check them out. They have a great spot, and I'm sure you can perform there too.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So again, thank you for being on the show, and good luck to you in everything that you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com.